I remember the night the border swallowed my soul. We were 4 kids, barely men, thinking we were about to smuggle tequila across to the other side. That was the lie that hooked us the bait dangling before wide-eyed boys who mistook danger for adventure. Instead of easy money, I found myself pressed against a cold wall of unfinished blocks in a wasteland outside Tijuana, staring down the black barrels of rifles. The silence was heavier than the desert air. One of my friends broke first, sobbing, pleading for mercy. His voice cracked with terror, and before he could finish his sentence, the shot rang out. The sound was short, brutal, final. He fell like a puppet with its strings cut, dust rising from his body. Another friend begged, swearing we didn't know anything, that we were just kids. His words bought him nothing. A second gunshot split the night, and suddenly there were only 2 of us standing. That's when I understood the rule. The more you begged, the quicker they pulled the trigger. My legs shook, but I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth would break. I refused to cry, refused to tremble. I forced myself to stare past the gunman into the horizon as if I had already accepted the bullet. Inside I was breaking apart, but on the outside I was stone. One of them pressed the muzzle of his rifle against my forehead. I felt the cold metal, the weight of death, a breath away. I waited for the shot. Instead, he lowered the weapon. His voice was rough, almost amused. "Este cabrón tiene huevos." He didn't beg. His partner nodded. "Take him. Let the CF decide." In that instant, I realized silence had saved me, where words had killed. But it wasn't a victory, it was a sentence. They shoved me back into the truck, my hands slick with sweat, my face a mask of steel. Behind the mask, my heart screamed for the 2 bodies left in the dirt, my brothers from the streets, who once played soccer with me, who shared tortillas at my mother's table. I had just watched them executed like animals, and all I could do was swallow the grief, bury it deep, and pretend it didn't matter. When the truck finally stopped, I was led into a house guarded by men with rifles and eyes that carried no mercy. They left me in a room for hours until a man stepped in. The others treated him with the kind of respect that came from fear. He studied me with a crooked smile, asked why I was still alive. The guards told him he didn't beg. The man nodded slowly, then said words that burned into me like a brand. Those who know how to keep quiet are worth more than those who speak too much. That was the moment I crossed a line I could never return from. My silence had bought me life, but it had also chained me to a world I never asked to join. A world where life was measured in bullets, and respect was nothing but fear dressed in different clothes. You think the border is just a line on a map, numb. It's a wound that bleeds, and I became one of its ghosts the night I learned about the blood toll. I didn't grow up starving. That's the first truth I need to admit. My story isn't one of hunger pushing me into the arms of the cartel. No, mine was something uglier. Curiosity, arrogance, the belief that I deserved more than what life had given me. My father worked construction, his back bent under the weight of bricks and steel. He'd come home with dust in his hair, his hands torn by nails and concrete, but he never once complained. My mother scrubbed floors in houses that weren't hers, inhaling bleach until her lungs burned. Still, we always had beans, tortillas, maybe chicken on Sundays, if money stretched far enough. We didn't have luxury, but we had enough to live. I was a kid in a working-class neighborhood of Tijuana, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where street basketball courts doubled as our boardrooms, where dreams were cheap, but temptation was everywhere. I remember staring at Italica, motorbikes speeding past, imagining myself on one wind in my face, friends behind me, the envy of the block. That was my dream back then, not wealth, not power, just a motorcycle, and the illusion of being bigger than I was. But pride is a poison that doesn't need hunger to take root. I wasn't satisfied with enough. I wanted more, faster, louder, easier. So when one of my closest friends whispered about a business opportunity, I didn't stop to ask too many questions. His voice carried excitement, not desperation. "We can make real money," he said. "Easy money. Just moving a few crates of tequila. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous. At least that's what we wanted to believe." We laughed about it on the basketball court, 4 kids pretending to be businessmen. We drew plans in the dust with the tips of our shoes, like generals mapping out a war. Except our war was supposed to end in quick cash and bragging rights, not bullets, not graves. Looking back, I can see the arrogance written all over us. We thought we were untouchable, that danger was something that happened to other people. When you're young, you confuse recklessness with courage. You think you can play with fire and walk away without a burn. The plan seemed simple: meet a contact at a gas station near Tecate, load up with tequila bottles, cross the border, and cash in. We told ourselves it wasn't even smuggling, it was just flipping merchandise the same way people sold DVDs or fake sneakers. We didn't realize we were walking straight into the jaws of the cartel, that our so-called opportunity was nothing but bait. My parents didn't know where I was that night. My father thought I was studying. My mother thought I was with friends watching a soccer game. If they had known the truth, maybe they would have locked the door, begged me to stay home. But I wouldn't have listened. Back then, I thought I was smarter than them, braver, destined for something greater. The reality is, I was just a boy too proud to see the cliff he was walking toward. That night, when we climbed into the truck with black-tinted windows, our excitement buzzed like static in our veins. We thought we were stepping into the first chapter of a success story. In truth, we had already signed our death warrants. I used to wonder if I could have made a different choice, if I could have stayed on the path my father laid out: school, hard work, and honest living. But curiosity whispered louder than reason, and arrogance drowned out every warning. That was the last night I was just a boy dreaming of a motorbike. The next morning, I would wake as a ghost of the border, shackled to a machine of death disguised as business. The first step into hell never feels like hell. That's the trick. It feels like excitement, like a secret adventure only you and your friends are brave enough to attempt. That night we told ourselves we were smugglers, contrabandistas in the making. We imagined crossing the border with bags of tequila, laughing at how easy money could be. But when the black truck rolled up to the gas station, tinted windows swallowing the light, something inside me twisted. 2 men stepped out, rifles hanging from their shoulders, their faces carved into stone. They didn't ask who we were, didn't smile, didn't joke. They just ordered "Subanse." Get in. We exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared back out. We still thought it was part of the game, that danger itself was a costume we could try on for a night. So we climbed in our backpacks, empty our heads full of fantasies. The road stretched into darkness, mile after mile of silence. No crates of tequila, no friendly contact waiting with cash. Just the hum of the engine and the suffocating weight of dread. The further we drove, the more the excitement drained out of us. By the time the truck stopped in that desolate field, my mouth was dry as dust. They herded us out, lined us against a half-built wall. The desert wind cut through my shirt, but the cold I felt wasn't from the air. It was the kind that seeps into your bones when you know something is wrong, terribly wrong. One of my friends started crying. Another begged. I wanted to scream too, but the sound froze in my throat. Then the shots came. Quick, merciless. 2 lives ended in seconds, their bodies crumpling onto the dirt. That was the moment I realized this wasn't business. It was a test. A test we hadn't agreed to take. I stood there, my fists clenched, my jaw locked. Inside, I was a child shaking in terror. But outside, I forced myself to look unflinching, to stare past the gunman into the black horizon. My silence was my only shield. When they lowered the rifle from my forehead and muttered, "Este cabrón tiene huevos," I understood. My silence had chosen my path. My friends had paid with their lives. I was paying with mine in another way, by being dragged deeper into a world I never wanted. They threw me back into the truck, and this time I didn't mistake it for a ride to adventure. It was a prison on wheels, carrying me away from the boy I had been. The safe house where they took me smelled of sweat gun oil and fear. Men with rifles patrolled like shadows, their eyes scanning me as if I were already property. Hours passed before a man entered the one they called Jefe. His presence filled the room like a storm. He listened to their explanation why I was alive when the others weren't, and then gave a crooked smile. "Those who know how to stay quiet live longer," he said. "Let's see if this one can prove it." They tossed a battered Nextel radio at my chest. Its weight crushed me more than any rifle. "From now on, this is your shadow. You answer when it calls you, obey without question. Fail once, and you won't last a day." That was my initiation, not a handshake, not a contract, but a sentence. I had crossed the first invisible line of the underworld. My childhood ended there in a room full of guns and silence, with a radio pressed against my ribs and the ghosts of my friends buried in the desert. I thought I had survived that night. In reality, I had just been recruited. They didn't tell me I was joining. They told me I was surviving. There's a difference. One feels like a choice. The other feels like chains tightening around your throat. For 2 days, I was kept inside the safe house like a dog on a short leash. The walls sweated with damp, the barred windows let in only slivers of light, and the men outside never stopped watching me. They gave me a single taco of beans, a glass of water. Nothing more. Their silence was louder than words. It told me I didn't belong to myself anymore. On the second night, the same man who had spared me walked in. His eyes were sharp, like he could cut me open without a blade. "Nobody survives by accident," he said. "If you're still breathing, it's because we saw something in you. Now you'll prove it." He reached into his jacket and tossed me an old Nextel radio. The plastic cracked against my chest, heavier than any weapon I had ever touched. "This is your shadow," he said. "You'll carry it everywhere. When it calls, you answer. If you fail, once you're finished." I nodded, though every fiber in me wanted to hurl the thing out the window and run, but run where my friends were already dead. My family had no idea where I was. The border had become my prison. That same night, they pushed me into another truck. The road climbed higher dust, choking the headlights until the world was nothing but rock and darkness. When we stopped, I found myself on a cold ridge overlooking the line of the border. From that vantage point, I could see faint lights blinking in the distance, San Diego glowing like a mirage of another universe. "This is your post," the older man with me, El Flaco, said. His voice was dry as bone. "You'll sing everything you see. Patrols, border patrol, strange cars. If you think of disappearing, better shoot yourself first. We don't forgive." The night air stung my face. They set me down on a stone, handed me a code as if it were scripture, "Águila uno, todo tranquilo." That was the phrase I would repeat every hour. It didn't matter if nothing was happening. What mattered was obedience, discipline, silence. I gripped the radio until my knuckles whitened. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every distant engine made my heart hammer. Still, I spoke the code when the radio hissed alive. "Águila uno, todo tranquilo." My voice shook, but it was enough. They answered copiado. "Stay alert." Hours passed like years. Dogs barked in faraway houses. Headlights flared and disappeared. The desert stretched eternal. My teeth chattered from the cold, or maybe from fear. El Flaco squatted beside me, teaching me the language of survival. Green means patrol. White is border patrol. Blue, customs. Red, enemies. Don't make mistakes, kid. A single wrong word costs lives. His eyes bore into mine, drilling the lesson deeper than bullets. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I wasn't here because I was brave. I was here because I had survived when my friends hadn't. At dawn, they hauled me back to the house. The Jefe was waiting, his gaze like stone. "You survived your first watch," he said flatly. "Now remember, here life is worth nothing. The only thing that keeps you standing is obedience. Doubt once, and you'll end like your friends." The words burned into me, a mark invisible but permanent. That was my true initiation, not a ceremony, not a brotherhood. Just fear sharpened into a blade pressed against my throat. I was no longer a boy from Tijuana. I was a halcón, a ghost of the line condemned to watch and report, to measure life in codes and silence. And deep inside, I already knew this was only the beginning. The first missions didn't involve guns in my hands. They involved a radio, my eyes, and the weight of knowing that every word I spoke could kill. That was the cruelty of it. Your tongue became a weapon sharper than any blade. They trained me fast. The codes were burned into my mind like holy verses. Green for patrol cars, white for border patrol, blue for customs, red for rivals. A pulsera of the right color meant someone had permission to cross. A word out of place meant they didn't, and when they didn't, blood was the price. One night, I sat on a ridge near Otay, the radio pressed to my mouth, when I saw 3 shadows slipping through the dust. They carried heavy backpacks. My stomach knotted. I whispered into the radio, "Águila dos." Possible red movement. 3 individuals with cargo. Minutes later, the night erupted with engines. Trucks rolled in headlights, slicing through the dark. Men poured out with rifles raised. The 3 didn't even have a chance to run. Shots cracked, bodies fell. I watched from above, my breath caught in my throat. Their backpacks burst open in the dirt, just clothes, shoes, maybe a few supplies. I'll never know if it was drugs or just their lives stuffed into those bags. The radio hissed. Movement neutralized. "Good job, Águila dos. Stay in position. Good job." Those words clanged in my skull like iron bars. My report had killed 3 men. My silence that night against the wall had saved me, but now my words were killing others. I didn't sleep. I lay on the cot in the safe house, the sound of gunfire echoing in my ears, my throat dry as ash. But the missions didn't stop. Every night, a different ridge, a different stretch of border. Sometimes it was quiet dogs barking a lonely truck passing on a dirt road. Other times the radio came alive with tension. Águila, eyes open. Possible reds approaching. And my voice, steady now, would deliver the details. Cars, families, shadows. The cartel decided the rest. One evening, I spotted a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, walking with tired steps along the dust trail. I reported it without thinking, my training automatic red movement. 4 individuals approaching the fence. Hours later, I heard on the frequency, "Execution complete." The next day, I saw their backpacks piled in the warehouse, toys still inside cheap dolls, with cracked faces staring up at me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed the rage, bit my tongue until it bled. In that silence, another piece of me died. The veterans told me this was the way of the border. Here, respect is written in blood. Mercy gets you killed. They laughed as they drank, as if this was just routine. I forced myself to laugh with them, even as guilt hollowed me out inside. With each mission, I became more disciplined, more precise. I could identify a vehicle by its headlights, a coyote by his stride, a rival by the way he carried his bag. My reports became sharper, colder. and the bosses noticed. They liked efficiency. They rewarded silence. But every word I spoke, every code I transmitted, built a wall between who I had been and who I was becoming. I wasn't a boy anymore. I was a halcón whose voice signed death warrants in the desert night. And though part of me clung to the lie that I was just doing my job, I knew the truth. Each report was a brick in my own tomb. Each life lost was another ghost I would carry. The blood toll wasn't just paid by the migrants or the rivals. It was being carved into me one mission at a time. The border teaches you to stop asking questions. At first I tried. I wanted to know why some people lived, why others died. Why a child with the wrong colored bracelet was condemned while another walked free. But every time curiosity rose in my throat, I swallowed it back. Questions weren't allowed. Only codes, only obedience. And the more obedient I became, the higher I rose. Weeks turned into months. The radio was no longer a weight I carried. It became part of me, fused to my ribs like another organ. I could identify the rhythm of patrol cars, the hum of rival engines, the shuffle of migrants in the dark. My words grew sharper, more exact. The bosses noticed. One night, El Flaco told me, "You're not just eyes anymore. Now you'll direct." It sounded like a promotion. In reality, it was a death sentence in disguise. I was assigned to oversee younger halcónes kids, no older than I had been when I started. They looked at me with the same mixture of fear and admiration I once felt toward the veterans. I taught them the codes, showed them how to stay silent, how to make their voices sound steady, even when their hearts trembled. Passing on the poison, one word at a time. The missions grew bloodier. Rivals began testing the line, sending convoys at night to challenge the Arellano control. I remember one evening near Tecate, the desert alive with gunfire. Our trucks clashed with theirs in a storm of bullets. Flames devoured a rival vehicle, and inside I saw silhouettes pounding at the windows before the fire swallowed them whole. Their screams followed me for weeks. When the shooting ended, we dragged bodies to the fence. The order was simple: hang them for the world to see. Chains tightened around necks, handwritten signs stapled to their chests. Así pagan los que cruzan sin permiso. This is how those without permission pay. At dawn, families approaching the border froze in terror at the sight. The message was burned into them before they even reached the line. That was the cartel's true weapon: terror. Bullets killed individuals. Fear controlled entire populations. In those days, money began to flow. They gave me clothes that didn't fit my old life: boots, jackets, watches. They pressed pesos into my hands, sometimes even dollars. They let me ride in armored trucks, taste whiskey I'd only seen in commercials. On the surface, it looked like power. Inside, it felt like chains dipped in gold. I no longer reported just patrols and migrants. I coordinated shipments, directed halcónes to different points, ensured that every shadow on the border was accounted for. I had gone from being a pawn to being a small gear in the machine. But gears don't choose which way they turn. They're forced by the system that built them. At night, when the safe house emptied into laughter and music, I sometimes caught my reflection in a broken mirror. The boy who once dreamed of a motorbike was gone. In his place stood a hollow-eyed ghost in cartel boots, commanding others with a voice that disguised his fear. And yet, part of me felt a twisted pride. I was no longer the rookie trembling with a radio. I was respected or feared, maybe both. Men older than me obeyed when I gave orders. That power was intoxicating, like poison disguised as wine. But respect in the cartel is just fear in another costume. And every step higher only brought me closer to the edge of a cliff I couldn't see. Because in this world, the higher you rise, the harder you fall. By the time I had earned a place among them, The safe house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like headquarters. Every wall, every corner, every shadow was part of the machine I had been welded into. The smell of gun oil and damp concrete clung to my clothes the way smoke clings after a fire. I carried it with me everywhere. Inside, the rules were carved deeper than stone. Silence was sacred. Loyalty was survival. Disobedience meant death, not just for you, but for anyone with your blood. They didn't need written laws. Fear was the Constitution, and everyone knew it by heart. I watched men disappear for breaking the smallest codes. A halcón who overslept his guard shift was found days later in a ditch, his tongue cut out. Another who bragged too loudly in a bar ended up hanging from a bridge with a sign across his chest. Así mueren los habladores. That was the lesson. We didn't just follow rules, we became the rules. But between the executions and the orders, there were nights of excess. The cartel loved its parties as much as it loved its silence. Corridos blared from speakers. Women brought in from the city danced in front of men who had spent their day torturing or killing. Tables bent under the weight of whiskey bottles, cocaine rails, stacks of cash. I remember sitting at one of those parties, surrounded by men laughing their mouths white with powder, their rifles leaning against the walls like sleeping beasts. They joked about executions as if they were soccer matches. I forced myself to laugh too, though inside I was burning alive. Trust didn't exist in that world. Everyone smiled, but behind every smile was suspicion. Even at the height of the party, someone was always watching, always listening, waiting for a slip of the tongue, a sign of weakness. Brotherhood was a mask, and beneath it lay paranoia. I saw friendships dissolve into betrayals overnight. A man who toasted with you on Friday might be executed on Sunday for speaking to the wrong contact or simply because a rumor floated up the chain. The cartel didn't care about truth. It cared about control. El Flaco once told me, "Here nobody is innocent. You're either useful or dead." His words became the law I lived by. Still, there were moments when the facade cracked. Late at night, after the corridos faded and the women were gone, I'd catch some of the older sicarios staring into their glasses with hollow eyes. Their laughter had dried, their bravado silenced. For a few seconds they looked human again, broken men trapped in cages of their own making. Then someone would shout, the music would rise again, and the mask returned. I tried to hold on to the fragments of humanity that still lived inside me. I wrote thoughts on scraps of paper, then tore them up before anyone could find them. I kept my voice quiet, my face hard, my heart hidden. But the truth is, the organization was already remolding me. Every day inside those walls chipped away at what was left of me. I had climbed higher, but instead of freedom, I found chains gilded with fear and cocaine. The cartel didn't just own my time or my body, it owned my soul. And I knew deep down that sooner or later, those chains would tighten until I couldn't breathe. The further I rose, the clearer it became that the real power wasn't in the guns or the radios. It was in the shadows above us, the ones we never saw, but always felt. They called them La Familia. The Arellano Félix. Their names weren't shouted, they were whispered like curses you didn't dare say too loud. In the safe house, the mere mention La Familia quiere resultados was enough to silence the room. It didn't matter if you were a sicario hardened by years of killing or a halcón trembling with his first radio. Everyone bowed to that phrase. I never saw them with my own eyes. That was the point. Their invisibility was their armor. Orders filtered down through layers of commanders, each one obeyed without hesitation. We never questioned where the directives originated. We didn't need to. The chain of fear was unbroken. Sometimes I heard stories from the older men. A commander who had let a rival slip away later, found hanging in the city plaza, with a cardboard sign. Aquí no se perdona la desobediencia. A halcón who spoke out of turn, his entire family disappeared within a week. Whether true or exaggerated, the message was clear. The blood toll wasn't just for outsiders, it was also for us. One night near Tecate, I overheard two mid-level bosses arguing. One said the convoy we were guarding had protection from corrupt soldiers. The other doubted it, suspecting a trap. Their voices grew sharp until one of them hissed, "La orden viene de arriba." The moment those words dropped, the argument died. Silence, agreement, fear. That was when I realized we weren't soldiers of fortune. We were pawns in a larger game. The real bosses never dirtied their hands with the border dust. They orchestrated everything from afar, pulling strings like puppeteers while we spilled blood on the line. And it wasn't just whispers in safe houses. Their influence reached everywhere. Judges who dismissed cases, police who patrolled by day and protected us by night, politicians who closed their eyes while the money flowed. Even the federal agents knew the system. More than once, I saw a migrant show his colored bracelet to a patrol officer, and instead of arresting him, the officer waved him through. Corruption wasn't the exception, it was the rule. We were told the bracelets, the coded phrases, the marks on backpacks were innovations of La Familia. And they were proud of it, as if turning human beings into commodities was genius. In their world, terror was a business model, and fear was currency, more reliable than cash. I began to feel the weight of their invisible presence everywhere. At night, when I stood on the ridge watching the lights of San Diego flicker like another universe, I imagined dark figures watching me from across the line, judging every report I made. Even in my dreams, they appeared as silhouettes, their faces hidden, their voices commanding. The men around me worshipped that invisibility. They said it made La Familia untouchable, eternal. But to me, it was suffocating. It was proof that no matter how high I climbed, I would never reach them. I would only ever be a gear turning in their machine of fear. That's the cruelest part. Guns can be dodged, enemies can be shot. But shadows. Shadows you can't kill, shadows you carry with you, even when you close your eyes. And by then, I knew those shadows had already claimed me. Every rise has its breaking point. Mine came not with a bullet, but with a whisper in my own head, a murmur that grew louder. Every night, I stood on the ridge with the radio pressed to my lips. Escape. At first, it was just fantasy. I imagined slipping into the darkness, crossing the line, not as a halcón, but as a man free at last. But in the cartel, thoughts are dangerous. They rot you from the inside, and sooner or later, someone notices the smell. I began hiding money, small bills folded into the seams of my clothes, stashed beneath loose floorboards in the safe house. Each peso felt like a brick in the bridge I was building out of hell. But every time I touched that secret stash, my stomach twisted with fear. If they caught me, it would be my execution, and worse, the execution of my family. Still, the guilt pushed me harder than fear. I had reported too many families, too many innocents who never made it past the fence. At night, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing their faces, children clutching dolls, mothers begging men whispering prayers before the shots. Their ghosts gathered around me demanding I choose another path. One night, I came close. I was stationed near the Otay checkpoint, watching the endless line of cars crawling toward the U.S. The temptation nearly broke me. Just one step into this crowd, one act of courage, and I could vanish among strangers. I even walked to the edge of the road, heart pounding like a drum. But then a convoy of our trucks rolled past, engines growling, and I stepped back into the shadows. My chance dissolved into dust. Eventually, I did escape. Not cleanly, not bravely, but desperately. I slipped away into another city, hiding in rented rooms, changing my name, blending into the faceless crowds. For a moment, I thought I had outrun them. I thought I had fooled the shadows. I was wrong. The cartel doesn't need to kill you to destroy you. They know a sharper punishment kill what you love. The news reached me like hammer blows. My younger brother disappeared first. My cousin was found in a ditch days later. My father dragged from his workshop and shot in the street. My mother left lifeless in her own home. Every message was clear. You ran. They pay. Each death carved deeper into me than any bullet could. I carried their faces in my chest like burning coals. I wanted to scream, to tear at the sky, to curse myself for surviving when my silence had damned them all. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. I walked the streets like a ghost, convinced every glance was a spy, every stranger a messenger of death. The cartel didn't need to send anyone. The fear alone was enough to cage me. That was the collapse. Not a firefight, not a prison cell, but the slow realization that I had destroyed my entire bloodline with one selfish decision to run when they had no chance to follow. I thought silence had saved me on the night my friends were executed. Now, I understood, it had only postponed the verdict. The blood toll would always be collected one way or another. And in my case, the payment came in the form of every face I loved, buried one by one. I survived. That's the cruelest part. I survived when my friends were executed in the dirt. I survived when families were gunned down at the fence. I survived when the cartel erased my bloodline one relative at a time. I am still here breathing, but it doesn't feel like life. It feels like a sentence with no end. People believe survival is a gift. They're wrong. Survival is a curse when it comes wrapped in guilt. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of those I damned with, my silence, my reports, my cowardice. I hear the screams of children who never made it to the other side. I smell the gasoline-soaked corpse they forced me to watch burn. Survival means carrying them all inside me, their voices whispering in the dark. And for what? For respect, for power. The truth is, there is no power in the cartel. There is only fear disguised as respect. The truck, the rifle, the radio, all of it, is nothing but chains polished to look like freedom. You think people salute you because you're strong. No. They bow their heads because they're terrified. That's not respect. That's a prison with invisible walls. If I could go back, I would tell my younger self real manhood isn't standing on a ridge with a radio waiting to decide who lives or dies. It isn't hanging bodies from a fence or shouting codes into the night. Real manhood is working construction, like my father did, coming home with your back aching, but your conscience clean. It's protecting your family, not condemning them. It's walking through the streets without shadows stalking your every step. The cartel sells a lie. It tells young men they're warriors, legends, kings of the neighborhood. But every so-called king ends the same, dead in a ditch, rotting in a cell, or living like me, a ghost carrying the weight of his own crimes. That's why I speak now. Not to redeem myself. I know redemption isn't mine to claim. Too much blood has been spilled, and most of it stains my hands whether I pulled the trigger or not. I speak because maybe someone listening will hear the truth before it's too late. Maybe one boy somewhere will hear my confession and turn away from the path I walked. Because let me tell you this, the blood toll is real. It doesn't matter how brave you think you are, how much money you're promised, how untouchable you feel when you ride in an armored truck. The blood toll will find you. You will pay with your life, with your family, with your soul. I've seen men laugh in the face of death, only to beg like children seconds later. I've seen mothers executed with babies in their arms just to send a message. I've seen entire families erased because one son, one cousin, one brother tried to leave. There is no escaping the toll. I am not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But if my words carry any weight, let them serve as a warning. Don't be fooled by the glamour, the corridos, the money that smells of blood. Don't believe the lie that joining makes you a man. The truth is simple. A man protects. A man works. A man endures. The cartel strips all of that away and leaves you with nothing but ghosts. I am one of those ghosts now, wandering in silence, condemned by my own choices. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you understand the truth I carry. In the world of narco, no one wins. Everyone pays. And the blood toll is never waived.